Déise Today with Damien Tiernan on WLR.
With thanks to mulliganspharmacy.com. Life's a beach with Mulligan's Pharmacies. Open late on the Dunmore Road and Intramore.
Well, no prizes for guessing what the story of the day is, and that is the announcement by John Deasy that he is to retire from politics. Let's have your thoughts on that decision on 083 3333 975. You can use WhatsApp if you want, or you can call 051 846 123. Before we came on air, I spoke to Kevin Doyle, who's group political editor with the Irish Independent, and he had exclusively broken the story this morning that John is to quit politics at the next election. And I began by talking about the divisive figure that is John Deasy.
Morning, Maria.
Always a controversial figure.
He's had a colourful political career, that is fair to be said, but no more so than his father. He's in the Dáil now since 2002, and he has made his impact in many ways, and particularly within the Fine Gael party, where I suppose he was something of a divisive figure, but he kind of revelled in that and was never shy to give his opinion, which in politics can often get you in trouble.
The criticism, he has criticisms of how the Waterford political system runs, and they have criticisms of him in how he did his job as well. So it was, do you think it was kind of always going to end like this time round?
But to be honest, and I spoke to John Deasy last night, I asked him more or less that exact question, and he was adamant that the rows, which I suppose came to a head recently, were nothing to do with his decision. And I'm inclined to believe him because there had been, I suppose, some speculation, and there had been some train of thought for quite a while that he wouldn't be putting his name forward to run for election. He has spent a lot of this Dáil term in America working on his role as an envoy over there. And there just had been that, I suppose, perhaps understanding in the background that maybe John Deasy had his eye somewhere else come the next time around.
Does he accept the criticism that, from a local point of view, he hasn't really been representing the people of Waterford, or is that just something that his critics use to have a cut at him? Would he think that he does good work on the ground in Waterford, even if he's not necessarily here?
He totally rejects the criticism. He would admit that he perhaps doesn't do the conventional every funeral and every coffee morning type of politics, but he says he told me before he has one of the busiest constituencies offices in the country. He still deals with everybody that comes to him looking for issues, and he made the point yesterday that if some of those who've been so effusive and putting so much energy into criticising him had actually put that into their own politics, well, maybe they Fine Gael and Waterford would be in a better position. And he's the elected TD, and he's the one who's been there since 2002 unbroken.
Now, he says his father left on his own terms and he's leaving on his, and that's one of the most important things in politics. But other people might say, he might be going because he wouldn't get re-elected anyway.
It's just an argument. I mean, every politician goes into every election wondering whether or not they can be re-elected. I think John Deasy would probably argue that he went in last time out on what was not a particularly good day for Fine Gael, despite where they had been in the polls under Enda Kenny going into that election, and that he was the one who held the seat in Waterford, that he hasn't lost the seat since 2002, and that there's a record going back with the Deasy name for half a century on that ballot paper. So I think he would argue that if he had decided to run, that he would be able to hold the seat.
Not a fan of Enda Kenny, I think it's fair to say, but I think he was hugely disappointed when Leo Varadkar took over, and he kind of had expectations of Leo Varadkar that weren't met.
Yeah, he never particularly saw eye to eye on Enda Kenny, and he wasn't afraid to tell the former Taoiseach that. And that did, I suppose, in some ways scupper hopes that he might make a ministerial role under Enda Kenny. He had renewed hope, that is fair to say, when Leo Varadkar took over. He had backed the right side, the right person in that Fine Gael leadership contest when it was Varadkar versus Simon Coveney. But ministerial office still didn't come calling. But the Taoiseach did pluck this role of a Washington envoy with a particular emphasis to try and secure these E3 visas for undocumented immigrants in America. That was a role that Deasy really liked, because he started out his career essentially in America working in the Senate, and he has always had a huge interest in politics, no secret of that. So he's been over and back to America a lot, And if you remember Donald Trump's trip to Doonbeg earlier this summer, one of the few things that the US president was well versed on was this debate around E3 visas. And effectively, he promised at the time that he would try and get it across the line. So there is hope that possibly in November that will go back before the US Senate, and maybe before John Deasy actually leaves office, that might actually get through.
And he thinks that's a role that should continue. He thinks it's a very important role, yeah. But for an elected representative, he did say.
He does. He thinks it should be built on. Obviously, it isn't. It's probably never going to be a ministerial role. We have a Minister for Foreign Affairs who has that level of stuff. But he's making the point that US politicians, I suppose, this is my words now, not his, they're a vain sort. And they like the idea of pressing the flesh with actual politicians rather than diplomats, if you like. So they like the idea that they are meeting a man, a politician who's elected and has been sent over by his government, perhaps rather than civil servants. And that's something I've seen myself, because I've been in America a few times on various political trips, and they always get very confused when senators show up from Ireland, because they think the senator is the big important politician. And obviously we can be quite disparaging of senators, shall we say, at times. But it is certainly true that American politicians do like that idea of somebody who holds office. And on that basis, John Deasy is saying it should be a role that's built on.
What kind of a mood was he in when you spoke to him? Because he has been the subject of absolute vitriol and criticism here, I think it's fair to say. Like, does that kind of thing get to him?
I don't think so. I'm sure he was annoyed over what happened earlier in the summer, back in June, with the motion of no confidence and the various rows that have been going on. Of course, he, at the time, claimed that the party had been ignoring complaints about the way the constituency was operating for some time. So he was annoyed about that. But when I spoke to him yesterday, I think he was quite upbeat in terms of what the future might hold, and he seemed very much that he had made his decision, and he was very happy with his decision. He wasn't humming and hawing, shall we say, about the fact that he was going public with it. He said that he'd actually spoken to the Taoiseach back in March, but because of that work that he was doing on the visas in America, it was felt that it would be better not to go public on it yet. So he told me that, he hasn't decided what he's going to do next, but given that he spent a lot of time working in America, he might like something in that, not necessarily in America, but something related to that type of work that he's been doing transatlantic.
It's amazing what politicians can keep quiet when they need to keep it quiet, isn't it? If he told the Taoiseach about it last March. And what do you think the future will hold for him?
Well, I think anybody who has survived Irish politics, and by the sound of it, Waterford politics, for as long as he has, generally when TDs who have a lengthy career like that, they do tend to be in demand for various boards. His US connections are quite strong. He has a law degree, of course, so he could fall back on that. And then, of course, Maura is on the telly every day. I think RT announced that Today Show is back for a new season. So, along with a young child, I think he'll have plenty to occupy himself.
And I suppose Fine Gael in Waterford does seem to be kind of splintered, and he did kind of reference that in his chat with you, or his interview with you, that it all seems to be about internal politics now and looking towards the next election all the time.
Yeah, he said he has offered in his conversation with the Taoiseach that he would help Fine Gael at the next election and back them publicly if they wanted in certain areas. He mentioned the name of Liam Brazel, a counsellor who he'd like to see put his name forward for a nomination that he might get on that ticket. Obviously, it's expected Paddy Coffey is running for election again. So it remains to be seen, I suppose, what the full makeup of the ticket will be in Waterford, and whether John Deasy will play a role in the actual campaign down there. I'd be somewhat sceptical myself that he would want to get too involved, given that he's actually decided not to run himself. But I suppose we'll have to wait and see when the election is for a start.
Thanks a million for talking to me.
Thanks, Maria.
That's Kevin Doyle, Group Political Editor with the Irish Independent, who have exclusively broken that story this morning, and I spoke to him before we came on air. Needless to remark, we have made contact with John Deasy's office this morning asking if he's available to talk to us. There's no response to that as yet, and we've made contact with several party members of Fine Gael locally who are either reluctant to comment at this stage or haven't returned our calls as yet. So if that changes through the course of the programme, we will of course return to it, and we will be returning to it anyway a little bit later on. But you will have heard in our news bulletins John Fitzpatrick, who's constituency secretary in Waterford for Fine Gael, and he said the party has not been officially notified by Deputy Deasy of his decision.
I was surprised. We had no prior notice of it, and we weren't notified that it might be coming. Obviously, we knew a decision on it was due at some stage between now and the next general election. We know the deputy hadn't confirmed one way or the other his intention to run or not run. So there was always a chance that he was going to announce this at some stage. So from a constituency perspective, we wish John well, and it allows us to kind of move forward and solidify our selection for the next general election.
Paddy Coffey was selected in December 2017, and now attention turns to who his running mate or mates will be.
We selected Paddy Coffey back in December 2017. It's likely that we'll add further candidates now that John has indicated he's not going to run. A number of those have been on WLR over the last few months, especially since the local elections, that have expressed their interest. So I've no doubt that, at this stage it's up to the Fine Gael Executive Council to meet and to recommend a candidate or two who might indeed be added. And at that stage, that process will happen over the next few weeks. Obviously, the quicker the better in terms of preparing for a general election that might happen any time between now and Christmas or even into the early New Year.
John Fitzpatrick, their constituency secretary in Waterford for Fine Gael. Well, let's have your thoughts on this news, please, and your opinions on John Deasy and his decision to retire and what you think should happen next. Love to hear from you. 083 333 975 for your texts, or 051 846 123 for your phone calls. Back with more after these.
Déise Today with Damien Tiernan on WLR.
With thanks to Mulligan's. Did you know you can collect your Blue Club points online? See mulliganspharmacy.com.
You are welcome back to the programme now. If you remember the All Together Now festival, people who were sitting in traffic jams, one person said that their child was like 8 months old when they started off to head to All Together Now, and the child was now 18. They were sitting in a traffic jam for so long, and I mean long traffic jams. And I think when most people got there, they were so stunned by the fabulous location of the Curraghmore estate that, it kind of eased their anger a little bit. But next year is coming, so what can happen to make sure that the same thing doesn't happen next year? And the organisers have acknowledged and are deeply disappointed with themselves and truly sorry that some areas of this year's festival fell short of expectations, and they're absolutely and fully committed to avoiding the problems of next year's festival. If you have any suggestions for them, then get them in to 083 333 975 or 051 846 123. Peter McGoran is writer with Hot Press and is on the line now. You're very welcome to the programme, Peter.
Hi, Maria.
Maria, it's a spectacular festival. Everybody who goes to it thinks it's absolutely fantastic. Stunning location. The first year went off pretty seamlessly and everybody was hugely impressed. This year, a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, I think it was mainly, when you look at the mistakes, I was heading down to it myself. The mistakes were mainly sort of from a logistical standpoint, it seems. I mean, there's far bigger festivals than All Together Now, which have run a lot more smoothly, and it seems to be mainly an issue of signposting and people not knowing where to go and people not knowing where the right entrances were for their camp, and staff not being as well informed. And I think that all sort of coalesced into this situation, which, like you say, people were waiting, hours and hours on end, not knowing if they were ever going to get into the campsite throughout the whole weekend. It was really, it all just sort of built up in the course of, small space of time.
And it's kind of hard to understand in that you'd imagine that, like, common sense would say to you, well, if you want to direct traffic around things, then you can't beat local knowledge. And there seemed to have been stewards directing people to places that they'd no business directing them to because it wasn't going to work.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it's actually, I think the locals were, fair play to them. They were out, they were trying to help as much as possible, and it was probably the locals that saved a lot of the congestion in the end.
And festivals like that, they are, when they go well, they're great, aren't they? They're such an experience.
Yeah, they certainly are, and that's the thing. It is a really, really amazing festival. You know, I was down in the first year. You could tell that it was something different. They had really, really gone to every length possible to make it tailor-made for families and to make it so that, you know, people were moving about. They were experiencing everything. They were going to the food stalls. They were going to the comedy tent. They were going to the music tent. It was supposed to be, you know, it's an all-inclusive festival. That's very much what it is. And to be fair, for the second year, it was the same thing. You know, they'd done the exact same thing. They'd got that right. It was really just about getting in that the issue sort of was. But whenever you were there, you could tell that this was a really special festival.
Now, they are going to keep the festival capacity at this year's level, which is an increase. I think the first year it was at a capacity of 15,000 and it went up to 22,500. But they're going to keep to that. So they're really going to have to, I suggest, go back to what they did the first time round, or definitely take on board the concerns of the local people if they wanted to go well next year.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, that statement that they put out yesterday, that was a really telling sort of statement in that it obviously they didn't increase the capacity. You know, you get the feeling that they're saying, okay, we got it. We know the mistakes we made. They acknowledge that, and they're saying, listen, we're not going to increase the capacity. We're not going to try and expand too fast. Maybe that was the issue, and they're going to try and, you know, get into the problems and make sure it doesn't happen again. So I thought that was a really telling statement, and it's, you know, you'd be very optimistic about what they can do then.
They totally threw themselves upon the mercy of the court, it has to be said. Like, they weren't, you know, trying to make excuses for themselves in any way, shape or form. They got it wrong and they said that. And it's, you know, I think if people are prepared to say that, then you'd have to be optimistic for next year that they've learned their lesson, that, you know, whatever way we thought was going to work, we made aims of it, like, and, you know, we'll have to go back to the local knowledge to get it right the next time. But you've been to loads of festivals like this, I presume. Like, is this just problems that happen at festivals like these?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's, you know, although altogether now it's such a firm fixture on the festival scene, it is only 2 years old, and it's, you know, it's teething problems, and it's a space which isn't sort of used to that kind of festival atmosphere. And, like, as I say, those very, very small, maybe overlooked logistical problems can become very big problems if they're not, you know, sort of if everything isn't going exactly as it should be. So I think that's what the problem was, and I'm very, very hopeful that it can be fixed. I think it absolutely will be fixed for next year.
And I think, like, the first year it had a very hands-on approach by the late John Reynolds, and he, like, took a personal interest in and met with committees, and you know, he had that special interest in it. Do you think that's important when you're organising a festival like this, that you have to get the locals on side?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. And I think, you know, obviously it was absolutely tragic what happened to John, but I'm sure that it would have sent a sort of wavelength where, you know, if you any business or any kind of event that loses the person at the top, it's going to have, like, repercussions going down. But yeah, of course, you need to include the locals, and you need to have that conversation there.
They really kind of give everyone a lift, don't they? Like, when people get to a well-run festival, and as I said, I think the festival, when people got there, everybody was impressed by it. There was a few kind of niggles about certain facilities, but most people, when they get there, they kind of forgive organisers an awful lot, don't they? Think maybe we should be harder on organisers and go, no, didn't work, not going again until you sort it.
Yeah, well, I think people know what they want, and people will, you know, they'll talk with where they spend their money, and I think people are still excited. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have been put off, but I think everyone who was in the actual festival grounds this year was impressed. They were suitably impressed. You know, the lineup really spoke for itself, and the actual atmosphere while you're in there, all the different things going on. You know, that for a lot of people made up for the fact, not completely, but in some ways made up for the traffic and all the logistical problems.
Wouldn't you have to feel sorry for people who live around an area like that? Like, everybody turns up, they're all enjoying themselves, but this is where, you know, I live, I want to park outside my house, I don't want traffic driving up everywhere, and at the very least I expect somebody to come and say, sorry, there might be a bit of disruption, you know, we're very sorry about that and hope it's not too disruptive of you. It mustn't be very pleasant to live around anywhere like these places.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I think that's, as I say, you know, I don't know what conversations the festival organisers had with the town before the festival, but you absolutely absolutely. You know, when you think of these massive events, you know, tens of thousands of people coming into the space which is made for a village, you have to have that conversation there.
And you enjoyed it anyway?
I did, yeah. It was a fantastic festival. It, you know, the like I say, the lineup was incredible. Patti Smith was she's such an iconic person that she came. She delivered an unbelievable set on the main stage. She did a fantastic kind of poetry reading in the afternoon in a very small tent where she paid tribute. You know, John Reynolds was a good friend of hers, and she paid tribute to him. And yeah, and then when you think of the Irish acts that were playing, Fontaine's DC got their time to shine on the main stage. You know, they were sort of the headline act on the Friday. Waterford's own dance act, King Kong Company, absolutely blew things away on Friday night. Yeah, it was a really, really incredible festival.
What's the best one you were ever at, Peter?
What's that?
What's the best one you were ever at? Best festival you were ever at? Yeah.
It's very, very hard to beat Electric Picnic. I think, you know, I'm still young, but Electric Picnic 2017, with, you know, you had the XX, a Tribe Called Quest, Duran. It was the festival for everyone.
Okay, we leave it there. Thanks for talking to me.
Great, no worries.
See
you.
Bye. That's Peter McGoran there, writer with Hot Press. Let's have your advice for the organisers of All Together Now for next year, please. If you were stuck for hours in that traffic, or if you're one of the people who were misdirected, or when you got there, if there was anything about the venue that you didn't like, let's have your thoughts and feelings on that so that they're aware of it. Now, there was an awful lot of comment online about it, so they're probably well aware of it by now. But just in case there's any little bits that they don't know about, you can let me know on 083 3333 975 or 051 846 123. Can I just let you know that the South East House and Home Show is back for a third year, and this year the show promises to be bigger and better than before, with almost 100 experts in interior design, architecture, home improvements, garden and lifestyle, all under one roof, and you're sure to find what you need for your home. If whether you're looking for a few decorative touches to finish off your room, some people have a real knack for that, or you're at the early stages of an entirely new build or renovation, it's definitely a go-to place to get a lot of expert advice. There's going to be special guests and celebrity chefs sharing their expertise across the weekend on the Inspiration Stage. Now, it's happening at the WIT Arena on Saturday 28th and Sunday 29th of September, and tickets are available on southeasthouseandhome.com with a very special discount available for WLR listeners, but it's for this weekend only. Use the code WLR20 at the checkout to save 20% on the discount price, on the ticket price rather. The offer ends on Sunday, so don't forget to use it. So if you're planning to go that, you might as well go for cheaper than it would have been if you didn't use the discount code. The discount code again, WLR20 at the checkout when you're getting your tickets. Now, there's limited spaces available for exhibitors at the show, so if you want to reach new customers and showcase your products and services to a great audience, then you can get in touch, find out more also at southeasthouseandhome.com. So that is how you get in touch with that. It's going to be a great event as always. Now, I'll be back with more after these.
Déise Today with Damien Tiernan on WLR.
With thanks to Mulligan's. Did you know you can collect your Blue Club points online? See mulliganspharmacy.com.
You are welcome back to the programme now. Problem gambling is what we're talking about next. Austin Pryor is the board member and addiction counsellor at Dublin's Rutland Centre, and he's on the line now. You're very welcome to the programme, Austin.
Good morning, Ray. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. Thanks for coming on. The reason that I'm talking to you is the record numbers, I suppose, of people who have reported to treatment units last year. And I suppose, because gambling is such a secretive thing, that's probably only the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. Well, I think that's always been accepted, even back over the years before it became kind of, talked about as it is now. They would always say that the number of people who presented for treatment is always a very small percentage of the actual numbers who are struggling with it, And I think that's because, it is really one of the insidious hidden addictions, if you like, because there's only so much drugs and alcohol or a substance that people can put into their body, and they show it at some level, But gamblers will always tell you that there is no limit to the damage that they can do. Before it becomes very obvious, Okay, I mean, they may have mood swings, they may look depressed, they may have, they may lose weight or that. But people kind of will be able to say, "Oh yeah, I'm just having a tough time at work" or whatever it might be. but there's no limit to the actual financial damage that they can do. And I suppose that's the reason why, in terms of, say, if you like, suicide deaths that are related to addictions, gambling has a much higher proportion than any other addiction, so it is very serious.
And as you say, they can, they could have lost the house, and they've become so adept at going in and going, "Hi, how are you? Had a great day at work," or whatever.
Oh,
and whereas if it's drugs or anything like that, you can't do that.
And the amount of stress they live under, because, say, by the time somebody gets to that point where they're not paying their mortgage or they're not paying certain bills, now they have to make sure that they get to the post before their partner or their parents or whatever. You know what I mean? So they're living under high stress all the time, trying to win back. That's another big part of it, of course, trying to make this big win that's going to make it all right again. So it's very scary.
And then, of course, there's I suppose it's almost like helping somebody to be an addict, and that you can, all the online stuff now, you don't even have to physically go anywhere, and you can be sitting in your house on your computer, losing everything you have, and things that you don't even have, you've still managed to lose them. Yeah.
I think that in itself, I think, has contributed to the huge rise. I mean, in Rutland Centre, we've seen a huge rise in the number of people presenting for gambling, even though that's still, I think, the tip of the iceberg. But that means that it is growing in general, and it's definitely down to the easy access and availability 24/7 of gambling apps and online, and the TV. I mean, look, you're watching something on late night TV and you're being bombarded with ads for poker or for roulette or whatever it might be. It's free bets, and it's very, very seductive.
Is it like any other addiction, Austin, in that until the person is ready, there's really nothing you can do?
Yeah, I mean, you're right about that, and people have to really accept that they do have a problem with it, And I think the beauty about a program like yours and the amount of publicity that's getting over at the moment is that it might highlight to people who are maybe in the at-risk category, who mightn't have actually crossed that line into that real destructive dependence, if you like, because it's like any substance abuse, or there's a kind of a continuum, so people do have, healthy betting habits, and, that they don't have any problems. But as it moves along and it becomes into more at-risk area where people are spending more than they can afford, or trying to, what we would call chasing them, or trying to win back money that they've lost. And, there's a whole tranche of people who are in that category as well, and maybe highlighting it like this might make people question their behaviour around gambling before it gets to the destructive stage where they have to come into somewhere like the Rutland Centre for treatment, And
is it a bit like other addictions in that people seem to think that, if you're why can't, if I'm an alcoholic, why can't I just go for the odd drink like other people and be normal? If other people maybe go out and take recreational drugs, why did it get a grip on me? And rather than going, I'm never touching that again, that maybe they're aiming for a, quotes, normal use of gambling. Is that a problem?
Well, you see, it is, and it's individually people, there isn't a kind of a formula, but individual people have to ask themselves, am I in control of this? Whether it's around substances or whether it's around gambling, the real question is, can I always stop when I want to stop, for instance? So, and typically somebody who's saying, well, I'm just going to spend €20, or I'm going to the race and I have €50 and that's all I'm going to spend. For the average healthy, if you want a social gambler, that's what they will do. But for the person who's veering into the problematic, they won't. They won't stop. So that question of, can I stop when I want to stop, is a really important one for people,
Okay, we'll leave it there, Austin. Thanks very much for talking to me.
Not at all.
See you. Bye-bye.
And keep up the good work letting people know about these kind of problems, because I think the more we talk about it, the better,
Thanks, Austin. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That's Austin Pryor there, board member and addiction counsellor at the Rutland Centre in Dublin. John Deasy announces that he's standing down, and Waterford Local Radio is interviewing a journalist from Dublin. The journalist broke the story, to be fair, to get information about this. Well, nothing changes with Mr. Deasy still keeping the Waterford people in the dark Arrogance and lack of respect for Waterford people, says John. Poor John Deasy, how will he ever manage waiting till he's 68 for his pension? Oh wait, he's a politician, says somebody else. He won't go to the electorate and he won't come on air to tell the people of Waterford his plans, but he will no doubt collect his pension. All of those things are well within John's rights and entitlements to do. And he would argue, I'm quite sure, that just because maybe he wasn't around, and let's hear from the people that he represented. Do you feel that the criticism is that he was never here? So do you think that you still managed to get things done by contacting him, or is the criticism fair? Let's hear from you on that. 083 3333 975. That is how you get in touch. Back after these.
Déise Today with Damien Tiernan on WLR.
With thanks to mulliganspharmacy.com. Life's a beach with Mulligan's Pharmacies. Open late on the Dunmore Road and in Tremore.
You are welcome back to the programme now. The Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has issued a statement on John Deasy's decision to retire. And part of it says, John can be proud of the service he's provided to his hometown of Dungarvan, which is also my mother's hometown. The regeneration of the waterfront, restoration of St John's Castle, the Smarter Transport Project, Mercyhurst College and the Déise Greenway have all transformed the town in the past few decades into a tourism, leisure and employment hub between Waterford City and Cork City. In Waterford, Fine Gael secured 30% of the vote in the last election and 25% in the recent local elections. On both occasions, we polled ahead of any other party. We will now seek a candidate to join Senator Paudie Coffey on the ticket to secure our seat and, on a good day, challenge for a second in the next general election. What do you think? What kind of a reaction do you have to that statement from the Taoiseach? 083 3333 975 is how you let me know. You can use WhatsApp or call 0518 46123. But moving on to something entirely different, 140 years ago this week, the Knock apparitions took place. Since then, pilgrims have continued to visit the site where the Virgin Mary and two saints were said to have appeared. Now, Michael Kelly is the editor of the Irish Catholic and he's on the line. Michael, it was a different Ireland 140 years ago.
Oh, it was a completely different Ireland. I mean, in fact, I think it's almost impossible for us to imagine nowadays just how desperately poor the country was at that time. I mean, it's interesting if you look on the Knock website, they have some images from the time, and it looks almost medieval. The types of homes the people are living in, even the dress of the people. Remember, this was very, very shortly after the famine, which devastated the country, particularly devastated that western seaboard. This was around the time of the land agitation, when there was a lot of tension. So it was a completely different world, and in fact, people would have known very, very little about what was going on in the rest of the country. Never mind what was going on in the rest of the world. I mean, to describe Knock at the time as an isolated village would probably be no overstatement.
And they certainly made the most out of the apparitions, didn't they?
No, very much so. I mean, the apparition itself, as you say, it's 140 years this year, and it was 15 local people who reported seeing this apparition. The apparition they reported had Our Lady, had St Joseph, and St John the Evangelist, with a kind of an altar to the left with the Lamb of God on it. Now, interestingly, if one compares this to other reports of Marian apparitions around the world, Mary didn't say anything at Knock. I mean, if you look to Lourdes, for example, or Fatima, these very well-known shrines where many Irish people have visited, there were messages there. There were words spoken by Our Lady there. But at Knock, the vision, which by the way went on for about 2 hours, the people report, there was nothing said. It was a silent apparition. So I mean that makes it quite interesting when one sets it aside a lot of other reports of Marian apparitions from around the world.
Because there was kind of, suspicions that it was some kind of magic lantern thing at the time, but you'd wonder what was the point of it if they didn't talk.
Well, exactly, because, you could imagine if there was some kind of message, you could easily say, well, somebody wanted to manipulate that to provide a particular message or to get the villagers to unite around a particular narrative. One of the interesting things when we think of, projection or trickery or something like that, actually the first people to consider all of those outcomes is the church. The church, it might surprise people, is actually very, very sceptical sceptical about these phenomenon, and they're not quick to jump on them at all. They really go out of their way to rule out any other possible explanation for the matter first. And actually, the parish priest at the time, Archdeacon Kavanagh, was very sceptical when people came to tell him about it. He felt that the people maybe were losing their minds. But the Commission of Inquiry, then, of which he was part of, they interviewed all the witnesses. They interviewed them all separately. They found their testimony credible, and it was later decided then by Archbishop McHale that it was something that was worthy of belief, that the apparitions there were worthy of belief. And I suppose the crowning moment for it was in 1979 when Pope John Paul II visited Knock in that memorable occasion, just almost 40 years in a few weeks, and he presented the shrine then with a golden rose, which is it's the highest sign that the church gives to Marian sanctuaries, and it really is a sign of papal approval of the sanctuary. And as we know, last year it was the only place outside of Dublin that Pope Francis visited in Ireland. He was very, very keen to go to Knock because Pope Francis interpreted the apparition. He interpreted the silence as Mary not needing to say anything, that she was coming to console people at a very, very difficult and challenging time in the history of the Irish people. So words were unnecessary. It was a vision of presence is how he described it. And I think that's something that is part of the enduring popularity of Knock to this day, because there isn't this complicated theological message around it. Our Lady didn't ask for anything at Knock in the way that, for example, at Fatima, she requested that the children say certain prayers. At Lourdes, she made these requests as well. So Knock's a very, very simple apparition in that sense of things, and so I think that is part of the ongoing appeal. Because talking to Father Richard Gibbons during the week, who's the current rector, he says their numbers are actually up this year on previous years, so that's something that he's very pleased about. And one of the things I find interesting when I go to Knock is, you meet all sorts of people there. You meet people there who never go to Mass in their own parish. You meet people there who would not describe themselves as very religious. And yet Knock is just something that is there on their calendar every year. It's somewhere they go every year. It's somewhere they remember maybe going as children, and it's somewhere that is very special to them. And one of the things I think that appeals about Knock as well is there's a certain anonymity there in Knock. Whatever people are struggling with, whatever people are reflecting about, whatever they're praying for, nobody's asking you your business at Knock. You can very much be a very private pilgrim and just do your own thing as part of your own spiritual journey. And
I suppose its fame started to spread then when people started to be cured.
Well, exactly, very much so. There are some very early photographs from the early part of the 20th century of people who they left their canes, they left their walking aids behind at the gable wall of the church, because Knock, as we know it today, the sprawling complex, if you like, that was really a feature of the late 20th century. Really, in the 1970s, the vision of Monsignor James Horan, who brought about the famous airport at Knock as well. But
that was a miracle in itself, really, when you think back to the time, wasn't it?
No, very much so. And actually, I think the local people in Knock have really they've cherished and they've embraced the airport to such an extent that it actually is a working, viable airport now. That is making its own way in a very, very challenging aviation market. But as you say, the cures was something that spread the conversation about Knock. People in Dublin started talking about Knock. People in the north started talking about Knock. People started going on pilgrimage there to Knock with very often with the hope of being cured, the hope of getting a healing. And to this day, the people who are unwell are very much at the heart of Knock. They're very much in the front row. But I had a very touching experience there a few years ago when I was speaking with a lady who was she was living with a disability, and she was saying to me, she said, I don't come here for a cure. She said, I come here for peace. She said, the thing about Knock is it's the people who are well who get cures at Knock. And I thought it was quite interesting, because in some ways we can see people on the surface, and we can see that people appear well, but often there can be all kinds of psychological problems that people have, or spiritual problems, internal mental problems, and just to have a place of solace like that, I think is hugely important for people.
And do we know what happened to I think it was it Mary Burney and Mary McLaughlin? That they were the first people to see this apparition. Do we know what happened to them?
Yeah, they went on. They lived their lives in the village. In fact, the 14 of the witnesses continued to live in the village. One of them moved to the United States. He was young at the time, and not uncommon for the era. Then moved to America. But when he died, his body was brought back to Knock. And one of the interesting things, they asked him on his deathbed, they said, look, are you really sure? Are you 100% that you saw this? Nobody asked you to say this, or nobody tricked you or anything. And to his dying breath, he held to it. He said, no, absolutely. He said, everything that we reported seeing at Knock is how it was. So what they do now is they honour those witnesses. Every year now they have a procession. Local people dress up in costumes from the time. Local children dress up as some of the witnesses, and they reenact it. So there's very much a strong connection, because Knock's a very small town, and it's still a small town. So the people who run the cafes now, the people who run the souvenir stores, they're the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, the great-great-grandchildren of these original visionaries. So it's very much a small, close-knit community. Even though a lot of people go there in pilgrimage, the population of the town has not expanded greatly over the years. It's still quite small.
Michael Kelly, editor of the Irish Catholic and also author, thanks very much for talking to me.
Thank you very much.
It always fascinates me that, these souvenir shops that spring up around places like Knock and Lourdes and all of that, do any of you have holy statues, like statues of Our Lady, statues of Jesus in your houses still? Let me know on 083 3333 975, or is it just kind of the thing that maybe your granny has or something? I know there'd be loads of Childs of Prague, I don't know, Childs of Prague, I don't know what the plural of it is, but a lot of houses have those maybe. But would you still have pictures or statues now, not pictures, statues of Mary and Jesus or other saints or anything like that? Let me know on 083 3333 975.
Déise Today with Damien Tiernan on WLR.
With thanks to mulliganspharmacy.com. Life's a beach with Mulligan's Pharmacies. Open late on the Dunmore Road and in Dromore.
You are welcome back to the programme. This texter says, I'm 35. I have a small statue and 2 small holy water fountain things in my house. I love that description. Let me know if you have. I'm just wondering, do people still have statues of, Mary, Our Lady and Jesus in their houses the way they would have done years ago? So you can let me know if you have one of those in your house on 083 3333 975. Plenty more for you in the next hour of the programme, and now it's time for the news at 11 with Judy.
Déise Today with Damien Tiernan on WLR.
With thanks to mulliganspharmacy.com. Life's a beach with Mulligan's Pharmacies. Open late on the Dunmore Road and in Dromore.
You are welcome back into the second hour of Déise Today. It's Maria in for Damien. He'll be back with you on Monday. We're returning to the news that broke this morning that John Deasy has decided to retire from politics, and the fallout from that, as I said in the first hour of the programme. We've been in touch with his office to see if he's available to talk this morning. We haven't had any response to that, and we've already been in contact with several party members of Fine Gael locally, and some of them haven't returned our calls, but a lot of them deciding that they don't really want to talk about it at this time. So we'll probably just keep their powder dry till we see what way the lie of the land is. But I'm sure we'll be hearing from them in the coming days. But we have to talk about him again, because I have on the line, waiting very patiently for me, I have Stephen Collins, who's a former political editor and now columnist and political analyst with the Irish Times. You're very welcome to the programme, Stephen.
Thank you, Maria.
Now, what's your thoughts on this? Do you think that, in a way, John Deasy was kind of half the architect of his own lack of progression, shall we say, because I think at one stage was very high hopes for him, and then there was the whole smoking thing and the vote of no confidence and all of that went on, that in a way his kind of slightly rebellious nature went against him initially.
Yeah, I think his rebellious nature did actually put an end to his prospects for being a senior politician, a cabinet minister. When he came into the door first in 2002, Enda Kenny made him the party's justice spokesman. So he's Fine Gael justice spokesman, which was a very senior position for a newly elected TD. He was up against Michael McDowell, who was one of the most combative and able debaters Leinster House has seen. So it wasn't an easy task for John Deasy, but he did okay. I think it was the smoking incident set him on a downward spiral. Enda Kenny then demoted him after that, and he became a very strong critic of Enda Kenny. Now, when it came to 2010, when there was an attempt to remove Enda Kenny from the leadership, if that had succeeded, John Deasy's prospects might have been very different. But he was so identified with the anti-Enda camp, when Enda kind of confounded the critics and survived, John Deasy's prospects really were very dim. So. And he's kind of steadily drifted downwards in terms of a national profile from then on. And even with Leo Varadkar, he was very much on the Leo side and anti-Enda again. But by the time Leo Varadkar took over the leadership, there were lots of other people contending for positions in Fine Gael. Because when John Deasy was elected first in 2002, Fine Gael were on the floor. So they were down to 33 seats. And that was his opportunity really to make his mark. And he didn't manage to do it.
And he was said to be very upset or inconsolable. I read this morning that didn't happen, that he didn't get that sort of backing, I suppose, the way he expected from Leo Varadkar.
Yes, I think he was very upset about that. I think he would have expected to be a junior minister at least. I think he might have actually hoped to be in the cabinet when Leo Varadkar took over, because he had never made any secret of his support for Leo Varadkar. And there were various people stirring it up against Enda Kenny. Leo Varadkar's hand was detected in the background in it, but John Deasy was very upfront about it. So when Leo took over and didn't include him as a junior minister, I think it was very much a bad time for John Deasy. Now, his role as envoy to the US was a bit of a consolation prize, but essentially it was a consolation prize.
But he gets an awful lot of criticism on the ground here in Waterford. Do you think that's warranted? Because, I think he has done good stuff.
He has done good stuff, and Leo Varadkar, in a statement out this morning, points out the work that he's done in terms of taxation for Waterford City as well as for Dungarvan, in terms of pushing tax designation for areas of Waterford. But I suppose Waterford politics, and I'm an outsider, I'm not from Waterford, but it seems always to be fairly fractious within parties as well as between parties. And I think John Deasy's, I suppose his attitude is he doesn't try to ingratiate himself with people. He's not the hail fellow well met. He says what he thinks, and that often in politics, that's not what people want to hear. Even though voters always say they prefer an honest politician, somebody who tell it straight. Actually, they don't particularly like being told some home truths, and maybe that has been John Deasy's political flaw. Mind you, his father was very much the same. Austin Deasy, in politics, again, they used to joke about Austin Deasy that he supported motions of confidence in every leader he served under. Even though Gareth Fitzgerald appointed him to the cabinet, even though he'd been hostile to Gareth Fitzgerald, but he was hostile to Alan Dukes, to John Bruton. So I think there is a strain in the Deasy family, all right, which is fairly blunt, and they don't do dissimulation or very well, and that, I suppose, in politics is a disadvantage.
And I've just thrown my eye here over the statement issued by the Taoiseach, and while he mentions some stuff, he doesn't mention any of the work that John did with the Public Accounts Committee, because he was very good at asking tough questions at that, and he did excellent work with the controversial Grace case. None of that is in the Taoiseach statement.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, Maria. On the Public Accounts Committee, I certainly would have noted that some of the people on the Public Accounts Committee, particularly Shane Ross and Mary Lou MacDonald, went completely over the top, caused problems, legal actions. They exceeded the boundaries of what they were supposed to do and discredited the committee in the process. John Deasy, by contrast, was asked the tough questions and was strong, but he knew how to stay within the limits of not breaching the legal advice that the committee was getting. So that certainly, I think, would stand to him as part of his performance. And the whole Grace issue, he certainly raised that and pursued that for a long time. So he has certainly achievements to his credit. But he's taken the decision. I think he's probably right. If he decided that politics at the age of 51, he can do something else with his life rather than lingering on and even retaining a seat but becoming embittered. There are plenty of embittered people in Leinster House, people who haven't achieved their potential or achieved what they expected, they still stay in politics. I think he was right if he got to the stage that felt he wasn't going any farther, just to get out at this stage and do something else with his life.
And Fine Gael and Waterford seem to do more scrapping with each other than they do with other parties.
Well, they do. The whole episode about the motion of confidence in Paddy Coffey and Paddy Coffey's brother, and Paddy Coffey's legal action, against the Kilkenny people was effectively against another TD or his own party was involved. It doesn't reflect very well on the party, and I don't know who they're going to select to run alongside Paddy Coffey. But I think Leo Varadkar makes the point in his statement that they would hope to get 2 seats. Given the record in recent times, I think there seems to be very little chance of that unless they can really improve the internal workings of the party and start to get along with each other for a change.
So he's 51 now. Will he have to wait to collect his pension, or will he be able to collect his pension straight off? And is that a sizable pension? Do you know?
Now, I think he would have to wait. They've changed the rules on pensions. TDs elected now in the last election or two will have to wait until they're 65 before they get a pension. John Deasy, when the new rule came in, I'm not exactly sure. Was it if he was elected in 2002, he might have got in ahead of that. I'm not exactly clear. The pension itself was reasonably substantial. 20 years in the Dáil qualifies you for a full pension. So normally people take 40 years to qualify for a full pension. 20 years is a full pension. So John Deasy has 17 years in the Dáil, and that will be so something, at least a security, even if he has to wait until 65. But I'm not. And again, we'll have to check that one out.
And do you think it's fair, because everybody's saying that not everybody. Let me correct myself. His critics are saying that he wasn't representing the people in Waterford or in Dungarvan. But does Simon Coveney get the same criticism? Because he's never in the country either, by virtue of his role. Is it unfair criticism to say that because you're appointed to somewhere outside of your country, that in some way you just can't possibly represent the people who elected you? Is that not a kind of a very parish pump attitude to have?
Well, it is a parish pump attitude to have. As you say, Simon Coveney's outside the country. It's not just in Waterford, people saying that. I remember when Dick Spring was Minister for Foreign Affairs, Labour Party leader, and the peace process was at its most sensitive. He lost a seat in Kerry because people felt he wasn't representing Kerry, and they've now gone to electing 2 Healy Rays. So the question is, what do we want from our politicians? And I think that is a moot point, because voters complain that they don't see somebody often enough. But I suppose Simon Coveney in Cork will be in a different position. As Minister for Foreign Affairs, there would be an acceptance that he'd be out of the country. I suppose it was John Deasy's the role in Washington wasn't quite clearly understood. And possibly, I don't know how he has been performing on the ground, but somebody said to me that he hadn't taken any part in the local election campaigns to support some of the local councillors. I don't know if that's the case, but if he hasn't been seen much on the ground in those kind of situations, I suppose people will get frustrated.
Who'd go into politics, eh?
Oh, I tell you, it's a very tough business. You need to have the temperament for it.
Well, I wouldn't have the mindset for it at all. It seems to be quite a nasty business in some ways, quite lucrative in others, but it seems to be something that you need a hard hide for.
Well, Maria, I wouldn't overemphasise the lucrative side. It's not particularly lucrative, really. Pension, they get reasonable pensions, but considering the amount of work involved, I think people who put the same amount of effort into other jobs would often be paid far more. And a lot of politicians, they take a bit of pay cut, if anything, when they go into politics. But I suppose it's the lure of power, and it's kind of an addictive job as well, which again makes John Deasy's decision to walk away, fairly remarkable, because most of the politicians, no matter how they're getting on, no matter how bad things are for them, they are kind of addicted to politics, and giving up at that age is not something that many do. So I think in that sense he is courageous to do that, and from his own point of view, he's probably right.
I always think it's it's a strange world to get into, like politics, because you're dependent on public opinion for you to keep your job, which sometimes prevents people from doing the right thing because they know it's not going to go down well with the people responsible for keeping them in their job. It seems like sometimes it's quite a ridiculous system.
Well, that is democracy. That is the real challenge, and I suppose the challenge that the politicians face, and the ones who are successful, to be able to do the right thing, to be able to take the unpopularity when it comes, to be able to take the right decisions and survive it. As I say, some of them don't. Dick Spring was just one example I mentioned there, who lost his seat, and the public are very demanding. So. But where would we be without politics or without politicians? That's the problem. I think with Winston Churchill famously said, democracy is a dreadful system, except it's better than all the alternatives. So that's where we are. But I think people do need to be the voters do need to be a bit more mature about how they look at what politicians do, and do they want them just to be messengers, delivering medical cards and getting things that people are probably entitled to anyway, or do they want them to take an active role on the national stage or even the international stage? Come to that, when you look at something like Brexit and the importance of that, you want people who are competent and who are committed and prepared to take decisions that will possibly be unpopular. And I think John Deasy had many of the qualities of that, but I think the frustration with languishing on the backbenches for so long has just finally got to him. Because
we have this perception that, we need a minister at the table fighting for Waterford, but it's almost like we confuse the role of a counsellor with a TD. Like, if you're elected a TD, okay, you're elected for Waterford, but if you're appointed to something, then that's your job. If you're appointed to be out of the country, then that's your job. You have to go and do it. You can't go, I can't go, Leo, because I have to stay in Waterford and be seen.
Yes, or else maybe say to Leo, I can't take that job. I'm not going to do it. But John Deasy did have the expertise. He'd spent time in Washington before, and he clearly he loves the United States and loved the kind of the whole buzz of the Washington politics, and he knew what he was doing over there. But it is the dilemma for every politician how to combine their role in doing their job with their role as the local representative. And I think there is an argument that our PR system, proportional representation system, and particularly the multi-seat constituencies that we have, that it actually encourages localism at a grand scale, really, because people are not just TDs who are elected, don't just have to worry about the other political parties who's going to challenge them. They always have to worry about who's on their own side and who is undermining them, possibly at home in their own constituency, in their own bailiwick. So it's the electoral system is also part of the problem. But again,
what's the alternative?
Public reluctance to change that. It's a long time. There were two referendums back in the late 50s and in 1966 when to change the electoral system, and people rejected it on both occasions. So I think opinion polls, have shown that there's no appetite to change the electoral system we have. People like having their TDs looking after their interests. Yeah. So I think basically, if you want to be involved in Irish politics, you've got to be able to do the local stuff, and how you combine that with your national duties. That is the real challenge that faces them. Alchemy.
Stephen, thanks a million for talking to me.
You're welcome, Maria.
See you. Bye-bye. That's Stephen Collins there, former political editor and now columnist and political analyst with the Irish Times. There's a question for you. Suppose John Deasy had been made a minister and he was the Minister for Foreign Affairs. He would, by definition of that job, be out of the country a lot. Would you assume that because he was Minister for Foreign Affairs that in some way he wasn't representing you, or that he wasn't doing work on the ground? I'm just curious about that aspect of it, so you can let me know on 083 3333 975 or 051 846 123. Back after the
Déise Today with Damien Tiernan on WLR.
With thanks to Mulligan's. Did you know you can collect your Blue Club points online? See mulliganspharmacy.com.
You are welcome back to the programme. This texter says, in my view, John Deasy hasn't helped in any way to improve Dungarvan or Waterford. So much more important things needed for Waterford City and County, and John was never where he should be, according to the texter, to help with anything. I'm sure you dispute that. So glad he's gone, and hopefully someone more deserved will get the position. Of course, he's never there to defend or even discuss when WLR look for him to come on air. Useless, says this texter. My opinion, says the texter, which came into 083 3333 975. All well and good what John Deasy did for his neighbours, Dungarvan, but he was elected by the people of Waterford. He's done nothing for those people, according to this texter, ever. So good call for him to retire. This is from Rita. Should have done it years ago, says that person there. I was asking you about statues. Do you have any statues? Somebody says, I'm 48. I've loads of statues. I wouldn't say I'm overly religious, but I have a lovely statue of St. Anthony that's older than myself. Another of the Sacred Heart, which is also very old. We used to love the May altar when we were kids, and also the Corpus Christi procession where everyone decorated their windows. Happy memories of a simpler time. That came in from Siobhan. And somebody else says, I have a statue of St. Joseph in my kitchen. I haven't since I was married 41 years ago. I have great devotion to St. Joseph and always ask him to protect my family in all walks of life. My own mother was the same, and I feel a connection with her when I see a statue. OK, those of you, maybe I should have rephrased my question. Those of you who have statues, did you inherit them from your mother or your parents in some way, or your parents' house? Or has anyone gone out in 2019 saying, oh, I need a statue of the Virgin Mary for the house? Let me know, 083 3333 975. Now, have you got a job? You might be surprised to know that over 100,000 Irish people who have a paid job are living in poverty. I can hear loads of you say, no, Maria, it's absolutely no surprise to me whatsoever that's the case, and put to the pin in me collar all the time. But to discuss this with me, I have Eamon Murphy, who is economic and social analyst with Social Justice Ireland. You're very welcome to the programme, Eamon.
Thanks very much for having me, Maria.
Just explain what you mean by people who have a paid job are living in poverty.
It's people who are in employment but are not earning a sufficient wage in that to live above the poverty line in Ireland, which is at the moment is about €12,300 a year or so. It's indicative really of the low pay issue that Ireland suffers from compared to, say, our European neighbours. Just as an example, the likes of Belgium, Finland, Holland have low pay rates of around 5%, 6% of the workforce. In Ireland is 22.5% are classified as earning low pay, and part of the problem with that is that the minimum wage in Ireland is so far below the living wage, which is what's actually required to live a decent standard of living in this country. So
what's the difference in figures there?
Well, the minimum wage at the moment in Ireland is $9.80 per hour. The living wage, which is calculated as basically being the hourly rate somebody would need to earn working in a full-time job in order to afford the essentials in life, that's $12.30 an hour. So that's a €2.50 an hour difference, and it's fairly significant, and it kind of implies that a lot of people need to be going without in order to some of the essentials in order to be able to make ends meet at the end of the week or the end of the month or whatever it is. Now, the government's Low Pay Commission have recommended that the minimum wage increase by 30 cents per hour in the upcoming budget. That's all well and good, but the living wage actually went up by 40 cents an hour in the last 12 months, driven mainly by the rise in the cost of living. Not the cost of living, but the cost of accommodation in this country. So at the moment, the cost of living for low-paid people is increasing by faster than the minimum wage is. That's only going to exacerbate this issue of people who are living below the poverty line despite actually working. It's a problem the government really needs to get a handle on, we feel.
And also that, when you do have a job, There's an awful lot of things that, okay, really low paid people still have that kind of bridge between, say, social welfare and certain things that they're still entitled to. But there comes a tipping point then where even if you have a job, you're deemed to be liable for every tax that's going, and the fact that you don't have enough money to pay all the tax seems to be irrelevant.
Yeah, well, there are ways, of course, the best way, of course, is to incentivise work over social welfare, is to increase the gap between what you'd get in a job versus what you'd be getting in social welfare. There's ways of doing that, like bringing in refundable tax credits, which would be a small top-up to people who are working, and would only, of course, go to people who are in a job. It wouldn't be increased social welfare. I think it's also kind of important to recognise that some of those welfare payments, they actually act as a subsidy from taxpayers to employers, like the working family payment, the back to work family dividend. These cost about €500 million a year, and they allow employers to get away with paying below what would be the going rate for employees, which it needs to be recognised as well. I think I suppose it's not just a case of asking employers to increase the amount that they're paying people, but the main thing really here is a policy failure on behalf of this government and previous ones, that the accommodation crisis in Ireland has gotten to the point where, had rents and the cost of housing not risen at all in the last 5 years, the cost of living in this country would actually be falling. The cost of food is going down, the cost of household goods and communications are roughly stable. It's only a handful of things like the cost of healthcare and accommodation that are increasing. So if the government were to get a handle on those crises and make the social investment necessary in order to take control of the cost of housing, health, transport and childcare, which are the key drivers of that increase in cost for low-paid people, then it's not just low-paid people, but almost all of Ireland would benefit from that. These are the public services that most Irish people actually rely on in order to underpin their standard of living. And if you want to take just the best example, really, would be of childcare. It's extortionate, really, in this country. That's due to the fact that we don't subsidise it to the same extent as our peer countries on the continent. And if you were to tackle that issue, if you were to expand the transport network in this country so that you didn't necessarily have to run a car in order to get to and from your job, and get a handle on the crisis in healthcare. We're in a situation at the moment where most people don't actually trust the public system. It means that thousands of people are spending €1,000, €2,000 a year on health insurance. These are all added to the cost for working families, and if the government were to make the necessary social investment in these areas, that would help to bring down the cost of living for low-paid people. And it would mean that the increase in the minimum wage wouldn't actually need to be as much for employers. So it's a matter of policy, really.
And are we doing better with the idea that some people say it's not worth my while to take that job if they are on social welfare because the job is so low paid? I suppose we're not doing as well as we could be. Social Justice Ireland has been advocating for a policy of refundable tax credits for almost 20 years now. Just to give a very simple explanation of what they are, everybody who's employed has tax credits, and once your tax bill is calculated, then those credits are used to reduce your bill, which is a very progressive way of doing things. But it means that the way that the system is set up at the moment is that if you're earning below €16,000 a year, which many people are, then you don't benefit in any way from any increases that the government brings in. So if you were to bring in those credits being refundable, it would mean that would be a small cash top-up of roughly 20 or 30 euros a week to low-paid people, which would help them make ends meet. 20 or 30 euros a week is a huge amount of money to somebody earning the minimum wage, and we think that the government's resistance to this policy is an opportunity missed. But I suppose the key thing is to acknowledge that, given that it is the accommodation costs at the moment that are driving that increase in the living wage, that the main thing is to focus on solving that issue, and the same thing goes for the health and transport issues, because these are the things that are really afflicting the low-paid people in Ireland. See, I think in an awful lot of instances, these decisions are being made by people for whom, I mean, we just had a text in from somebody who says, Maria, I'm on disability, I live alone, I get €212 a week, I have to pay property tax out of that. Like, this kind of, there's no real understanding, because nobody is kind of walking in your shoes, if you like. Nobody's realising that for some people, 10 or 20 euro is the equivalent of 10,000 or 20,000 to somebody else. It's that tight. Their budget is that tight.
I think if you're relying on 212 euros per week, then literally every euro is budgeted for every week. And you're right, there's a disconnect between people who are making the decisions as to where to allocate the available money. If we look at some of the examples of the last few years, some of the tax breaks that have been brought in for corporations that have cost hundreds of millions of euros, they could, with that kind of money, you could bring in, say, the cost of disability allowance, which would acknowledge the fact that just by virtue of the fact of somebody having a disability, their living costs are almost certainly going to be greater than for your average person. They mightn't be able to use the same kind of transport. There might be certain medication expenses. So that acknowledging that if we expect people with disabilities to be able to participate in society in the same way as everybody else, then the cost of that disability needs to be somewhat covered and somewhat subsidised by the rest of society. So it is a matter of policy and where the priorities lie. At the moment, this particular government seems to be focused more on, I think, getting economic growth numbers up and using that as a measure of how well we're doing as a society. But there are other measures as well that we were putting forward as to how well we're doing as a country. And that number that you mentioned at the beginning, about just over 100,000 people working in this country but still living in poverty, is a pretty poor one. If you look at the waiting list we have on social housing list at the moment, the multiple repeated crises in accident and emergency departments and hospitals around the country, we're not doing as well as our increasing GDP numbers would suggest.
OK, we leave it there. Eamon, thanks for talking to me.
Thanks very much.
See you, bye-bye. That's Eamon Murphy there, economic and social analyst with Social Justice Ireland. Are you one of those 100,000? Let me know on 083 3333 975. I'll be back with more for you after these.
Déise Today with Damien Tiernan on WLR.
With thanks to Mulligan's. Did you know you can collect your Blue Club points online? See mulliganspharmacy.com.
You are welcome back to the programme now. If you've been looking around Waterford City at all, you will see the colour that Waterford Walls is bringing to walls, which is quite self-explanatory. But one of the people who will be contributing to that is Shane Sutton, and Shane is in studio with me now. Shane, you're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Your work is what you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing sort of like astronaut and space things, which Chris Hadfield and everything has acknowledged is absolutely fantastic, and I've seen some of it, absolutely stunning. How do you? What I can never understand is, sometimes when you go to the cinema, and you see people sitting in the very front row, and I'm often thinking, like, how in the name of God are they even seeing the how do you get that big picture on a wall when you're so close to it doing the work?
It's one of the things that slows you down when you're painting, because you have to kind of stand back and see it all the time. But usually I just use a grid system, really. So I would have, for an example, an inch square on the page, or grid it out on the photograph that I'm using or the illustration, and then I'd do a metre grid on the wall. So I'd copy the inch metre into the metre. So if that makes sense.
Not really, but then that's me.
So it
makes sense
like
to anybody else, I'd say.
If you think of drawing a small picture on a maths page and those small little squares, and now you need to blow those squares up to an inch or to a foot or a metre.
And why did you start doing work that involved astronauts?
Funny story, really. I kind of just did it to escape from painting in a way.
Why did you want to escape from painting?
Well, I used to do a lot of landscapes and stuff like that, like city, very urban, photorealistic stuff. And I did a lot of painting. I'd always did it for me, but I was working in TV and editing at the time, so that was my bread and butter. And then I worked in a film in Berlin, and when I got back, I just kind of wanted to... I started a toy business, actually, but I wanted to paint on the side and do something that was not about gathering canvases and having exhibitions, but just about painting and it being a bit more free. So I went and did the first wall in Busyfeed in town, and then that was one that Chris Hadfield tweeted and all that kind of stuff, and then kind of started from there, really.
And is there something special about actually doing your work on a wall in an urban setting that's different from doing it in the studio?
Yeah, well, actually, what I really like about it is the fact that it's not on the canvas. When you have a canvas, you have to finish the canvas, you have to frame the canvas, you have to store it till you show it somewhere.
But
you
you get to keep it. You'll always have it.
Well, or you've got to sell it to do something decent, to be able to do another one, for example. So with a wall, it's really nice and kind of romantic in a way, that you just go up to your wall, you paint it, and then you leave. It's left there for people to see, and you don't have to really worry about it then. Whereas with a canvas, you have to there's a certain amount of baggage to the exhibition, if you know what I mean.
And how does it work? Are you allocated a wall, or did you come down before and do a recce and go, that wall for me, thanks very much?
I just applied to the guys in Water for Walls last year and came down, and I'd been down the year before actually with a friend of mine, Paddy Barron, who lives down here, and we talked about doing a wall, and then they told me about the festival, so then I applied, and then came down last year to do the first one, which was with Blackrock Castle Observatory actually, on Fitzwilton Hotel, is that right? Fitzwilton. And then decided, I was actually working in Dublin at the time, so I was coming down and painting and going back to Dublin and coming down and painting.
Is this your full-time job?
This year it has been, I won a residency with the European Space Agency and stuff, so I've kind of been travelling around just painting spacemen and astronauts and really enjoying the freedom of it being on the wall, and then the freedom of it just being such an adventurous topic, and kind of I've always based it on the narrative of that space in between, which is after you leave but before you get there. And I like that idea of not knowing what's happening, and these paintings have kind of brought me on that kind of journey, ironically enough. I'm feeling
anxious on your behalf. You haven't even started your wall yet.
No, it's okay. It's not the biggest wall. I think it's a gabe of a house.
You're confident.
And it should be, I mean, if I mark it out today, which if anyone's around, drop by, say hello. I'll be marking it out for the first hours with the grids and that system, and then sketching the lines, and tomorrow I'll be getting stuck into the painting. So
well, I'm sure it'll be stunning. Of some of your other work I've seen, so I'm sure it'll be absolutely stunning, and enjoy your stay in Waterford. And thanks very much for coming in. That is Shane Sutton there, and you'll be able to see Shane's work. Do you want to tell them where your wall is? Do you know where your wall is?
Gabe knows where it is. Do you know where it is?
Tell us.
It's going to be on the Sleevekeel Road, and it's a gable end that you can't miss.
Okay, Gable and
you won't miss it.
In case you haven't wondered why I haven't spoken to Gabe up to now, he's only in here to video, so he's just been called upon for a bit of a direction there. Shane, thanks a million for coming in. I'll be back with more for you after these.
The Days of Our Lives on WLR.
Brought to you by Home Instead Senior Care Waterford, helping seniors stay at home and maintain their independence. Homeinstead.ie.
Now this story is about two fellas in a pub. One was a much travelled, he had been all around the world, wasn't from Waterford, but he was boasting in the pub to all the places that he had visited around the world. And he was talking to a Waterford fella, who I say the farthest he ever was probably Dungarvan or even Kilmacow. But he seemed to have a great and deep love for Waterford City and South Kilkenny. And this is the poem. This is the tale of a Waterford lad who met with a travelled stranger. He'd never been to foreign lands nor braved the ocean's danger, but he made a stand for his native land, and other tales he recounted. And here's the tale as was told to me, cut it out and have it mounted. Where Niagara's waters tumble down, I've often stood in wonder, have seen the wide Mississippi stream that strives its back asunder. I sailed from San Francisco to the port of Farfouchew. Will you tell me, sir, says the other plight, were you ever in Kilmacow? 'Tis there they grow the finest buds, 'tis you'll have a grandson. There's a 3-month calf in Kilmacow, is bigger than an elephant, sir. I've sailed the mighty Amazon and seen the Orinoco, has spent much time in Guayaquil and much men packing cocoa. I've often been in the Argentine, where the gaucho spurs and buckle. Now just a moment, says the other replied, were you ever in Ballytruckle? Have you ever seen its mighty green? 'Tis lovely in the summer. 'Twas one, they say, on a distant day from the men's of Ballygunner. The other fella goes on then. Across the sand in the hot Sudan, I've roamed the mighty Nile, got a view of the great Karoo and tramped it mile for mile. I sailed the rapid Congo stream, and this I shall reveal. Hold up a minute, says the other fella. Were you ever in Sleevekeel? I'd rather go to Ballymacaw, to Passage or Dunmore, to drink the wines of foreign lands or lumber in Rabador. You may speak to me of the Zuyder Zee and the wild tribes of Bengal, but the man who's never seen moonkind has never seen nothing at all. Talk to you soon.
These are the days of our lives.
The Days of Our Lives on WLR.
Brought to you by Home Instead Senior Care Waterford. When it comes to Waterford seniors, only the best home care will do. Homeinstead.ie.
Déise Today with Damien Tiernan on WLR.
With thanks to mulliganspharmacy.com. Life's a beach with Mulligan's Pharmacies. Open late on the Dunmore Road and Intramore.
You are welcome back to the programme. Now, you might have heard the news that the Irish population was in serious decline before the Vikings arrived to save us all. Donnachadho'ceallacháin is curator at the Waterford Museum of Treasures. You're very welcome to the programme, Donnachadh.
Thanks very much, Maria. It's great to be on again.
Now, this is new research from Queen's University in Belfast. What exactly does it mean?
Well, I suppose really what it means is adding on to sort of information that we already had about the conditions in Ireland in the years before the coming of the Vikings. And I suppose like from about 200 years before the Vikings got here, things were really, really, really bad. And I suppose, from around the 530s on, things were going really dreadfully bad for the country. And I suppose we can put it down to two reasons. And the first one, of course, is climate change. We're all into climate change at the moment. But in 536, all of the northern hemisphere went into a period of extreme cooling. We now have global warming. You had a period of extreme cooling, probably caused by volcanic eruptions. And, for example, one historian writing way over in Constantinople, now Istanbul, a guy called Procopius, he wrote in 536 that the sun's light was without brightness, and it was like as if the sun was always in eclipse.
Aww.
That caused crop failures, and in Ireland it was recorded that in 536, 37, 38 and 39, 4 years in a row the crops failed, which caused horrendous famine. And then, to cap it all, to make matters worse, in 541 we had plague. So it was like all your disaster movies on Netflix coming at the same time,
We thought these days were tough.
Then the plague, plague appeared again in Constantinople in 541. It had originated probably in Central Asia. And by about 548, 549, that had arrived in Ireland as well. So you had the famine and plague now. And that plague actually, arrived here 548, 549. Now it wouldn't have maybe affected us as badly as, say, populated areas, but it was still fairly disastrous. And the thing about it was the plague just didn't strike once. It kept on reoccurring in waves over 200 years. The last major outbreak was in the year 750, just before the Vikings came. So now we had everything going wrong,
So they basically just brought new blood to us.
Sorry?
They basically just brought new blood to us.
They did, you had small numbers of Vikings settling here. And again, it's not you can put two and two together. They did settle here. They married into the local population. Population slowly began to recover. Now, the population would probably have been recovering anyway, slowly from this period on. But they certainly gave a boost, establishing urban centres like Waterford, Ireland's oldest city. Founded here in 914. So, and again, other cities as well, our near neighbour Dublin, Ireland's second city, we could say. So these urban populations, they attracted settlement again now from across Western Europe, people settling here, and of course adding to the population, And again, I suppose anecdotally, lots of people are getting their DNA done now. And again, I had a quick sort of straw poll here. Anybody here work with us who has got their DNA done recently? They all have Viking ancestors. I must get mine done as well, just to see. Probably as well.
Donnachadh, thanks a million for talking to me.
You're very, very welcome.
Thanks a lot. That's Donnachadho'ceallacháin, curator at the Waterford Museum of Treasures, and now about to present the quickest sports bulletin you're ever going to hear is Calvin Whelan.
Morning, Maria. We'll pretend we didn't hear that intro there now, but I'm only doing my best. I know it's as Bring Damien back quick, will you? Anyway, Gaelic Games, Senior Hurling Playoffs, and we have 4 cracking games to look forward to. The weekend starts tomorrow night with a double bill in Fairfield. Passage and Tallow has the makings of a really good game at 7:30. Really nothing to choose between the two teams. It's preceded by Ballyduff Upper and Roanmore. Roanmore would be pretty fancy there to account for Ballyduff. Then it's back to Fairfield on Sunday evening. Dungarvan and Four Mile Water Western Derby. That concludes the action. The draw for the quarterfinals will be made after that. And there's a big Eastern Derby on Sunday afternoon, 2:30. Clonay and Mount Sion. Mount Sion will probably be fancied there. It's a bumper weekend. There's plenty of minor action, plenty of divisional action. So best of luck to all the clubs. I suppose this stage of the year, the pace will begin to be up now, Maria. We're into the nitty gritty. We're into the knockout stages. So should be a cracking weekend. So get along and support your club. Best of luck to the Waterford Under-16 Camogie team. They're seeking All-Ireland glory on Sunday up there in Nina at 2 o'clock. They take on Limerick in the All-Ireland B final. So best of luck to Roisin Hartley. She's going to be on with Tomas on Lorna Porca this evening. Waterford FC make the lengthy journey to Donegal tomorrow. They're actually travelling up today to McGinn Park in Buncrana. They take on non-league Glengad United in the second round of the FAI Cup tomorrow. So it's underway at 5 tomorrow evening up there in McGinn Park. So hopefully Rennie and the boys can do the business. Ireland, of course, and England in the Rugby World Cup warm-up tomorrow afternoon in Twickenham. Counted on now, I suppose, that World Cup in Japan as well isn't too far away, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. And yeah, plenty to keep us posted over the weekend. Best of luck to all the various clubs. I know there's Waterford Premier League action as well. There's cross-channel action as well. Aston Villa and Everton actually kickstart the weekend tonight, and interesting that Everton, if they win, could go top of the table momentarily, but still very, very early stages of the season. So
if you
cracking weekend to look forward to. I hope I'm just looking
if you want sports news done quickly, there's no better person than Gavin Whelan.
Enjoy the weekend
to do it. Thanks very much.
No bother.
Oh dear. Anyway, you've been listening to Déise Today, brought to you in association with Mulligan's Pharmacy. The show is produced as always by Jennifer Long with the assistance of Aisling Boland. You'd be delighted to know that Damien Tiernan's back on Monday. You'll probably have to, remember that it's a family show. Thanks for all your texts and comments this morning. It was a pure slip of the tongue. No, I better not say that. That came out wrong as well. Okay, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm back in the morning with the Saturday Cafe, keeping it clean, I promise. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.